You're listening to Shelf Talk, a Food City podcast, the show that takes you behind the scenes of your favorite supermarket.
From new products, expert tips on meal planning, and all things community, let's dive in and explore what's on the shelf today.
I think I'm super excited for what we're going to be diving into today because we are going to be talking about Family Meals Month.
Yes, and not just Family Meals Month, but Family Meals as a movement. So talking about kind of this campaign to encourage families, no matter what that looks like for you, to gather together for more shared family meals. So let's kind of dive into some of the benefits of family meals.
And I think a lot of them are obvious when we think about it. We're going to improve connectedness. Mm-hmm. We are going to see a lot of studies around children's behavior related to family meals. And one of my favorite ones is that we recognize kids that eat family meals more often are more likely to consume more fruits and vegetables. So we know that's going to offer health benefit in the long term. And then another big piece of this is kind of that mental health component, mm-hmm. which I think is surprising for people because we understand, I could see that coming together would offer more space for conversations, but we see that it allows people to find a safe place at the end of the day to come together, relieve some of that stress. And so I think that's a really big piece of understanding why does this need to be a priority for my family to get together for these shared meals.
Absolutely, and that's beneficial not just for kids, but adults, everybody of all ages, I think, benefits from that connectedness, that time to just decompress at the end of the work day, the school day, whatever your typical week might look like. Some other benefits, of course, for to Family Meals Month is not just improving connectedness, but also communication skills. Research has demonstrated a link between increased family meals and lower rates of obesity in children, as well as better academic performance in schools too. So it really touches on a broad range of issues specifically related to development.
And I think a piece of that too is that when you're taking the time to come together as a family in the end of the day or middle of the day, beginning of the day, we're going to talk about when family meals can happen. We recognize that it probably allows you to reprioritize, take a step back from everything you have going on and offer that support. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a huge component for people. Now, we talk about Family Meals Month in September, which I think is prime time because we're going to the back to school season, tends to be a little bit hectic. So it's time to take a step back and say, how am I going to focus on feeding my family more or creating some of these opportunities for sharing these meals together. Mm-hmm. And I think we were talking earlier, barriers. So what do you think are some of the most common things that make it difficult for people to get together for this shared family meal time?
Well, I think the first that comes to mind is just a hectic schedule between work and if you have kids and are trying to gather them, if they're in sports or other extracurricular activities, it can be really difficult during the week. But a family meal doesn't necessarily have to take place during the week either. It can, or like you said, different times of day. It doesn't have to be in the evening. But I do think that lack of time to prepare a meal or even just finding time to sit down together is probably the key barrier that comes to mind.
And then I think before that, it's the planning, right? So even if you get home in the evening, you recognize there's time, and then you're like, oh goodness, what do I serve? How do I know what to fix or how to prepare it? So I think we've seen a lot of people losing confidence in the kitchen, in skills and things, or feeling like this has to be a gourmet meal that has all these components. But really, we recognize it can be simple meal ingredients. Mm-hmm. It can even be something that you pick up and bring home to eat together.
Exactly.
That can still offer that fostering time for communication and connectedness. And then I think the other component is maybe non-traditional family structure. So we use that word family, and we oftentimes think parents and children, but it can also be neighbors, it can be coworkers, it can be your nuclear family and friends. So recognizing shared meals are going to offer those same benefits. So you can define,
no matter the stage of life,
exactly what that family definition means to you. But most of our things today are going to be around that traditional fostering connections with children and parents as we talk about
Yes.
eating these meals together.
Yeah, absolutely. So touching on the lack of planning, you touched on it doesn't have to be a gourmet meal. So let's kind of go into some tips for making it more readily available, some shortcuts, if you will, to make it more accessible to families who are on the go.
Yeah, I think for my particular family dynamic, I'm always trying to think about if I have time to cook one night, how can I go ahead and prepare myself to be successful in a secondary meal? We talk about plan overs, so I won't probably feed my family the same meal twice, back to back. But for example, last night I was grilling up some chicken. So I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and grill enough chicken that tomorrow night that component of my meal is good, ready to go. So lean proteins that we talk about being lower in fat, higher in protein, those are things that typically take the longest for me to think about planning and preparing. So I try to build my shopping list for the week, knowing what days we're all going to be home, we're all going to be together, and thinking, can I have a meat ready in the crock pot? Can I get something that like fish or seafood that I can cook in 15 or 20 minutes? Or can I double up cooking on a Monday night, knowing that when I come home on Tuesday, I've already taken care of some of that planning. So meat tends to be the starting point of planning for me.
Yeah.
And that also fits the needs of my family more. I'm probably less. I could eat the same protein, same meat choice every single
Same.
night. They need a little more variety. So I find that asking their input maybe on a Sunday before I do my grocery shopping, checking out what's on sale, what we can work with, that tends to be what works for me and my family as a starting point.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a key point there in involving who your family is in the planning process. That's what my husband and I always do is we plan out, we look at our schedule for the week, what we have in scheduled, and then plan accordingly. There's bound to be 1 or 2 nights where I know I'm not going to feel like cooking anything at all. And so having something that either I have left over from the night before or something that I can quickly pull out of the refrigerator, freezer, pop in the microwave even, and feed the family is going to be a lifesaver, really.
Okay, and I think you've probably seen these memes. I know we all have, where it's like the produce drawer sometimes where like the bag of spinach you bought last week
Yes.
and then you buy it again and just replace. For me, it's not my fresh food, surprisingly. It is my freezer. I'm really bad about forgetting
That they're there.
that I have already bought tons of freezer food, and that tends to be another convenient, quick thing for me because if I buy frozen broccoli, I'm not concerned if I'm not able to cook fresh broccoli that week. I know it's still going to be in there, but that is somewhere I try to be. I've made a new kind of mid-year resolution. Check your freezer before
First.
you go grocery shopping. Because I find that's a place that like I use it quite a bit, but I keep it so stocked. I'm like, I don't even know what is in there sometimes.
Yep.
So that's another component for me that works quite well. But with you mentioned planning with your husband. Is there a technique for recipes or kind of keeping ideas together that works for you all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we have, of course, a stash of recipes that we have on repeat. We know we're going to have a couple of meals, depending on the season. So as we head into the fall months, chili is going to be a big thing because, one, it makes great leftovers, planovers, it freezes pretty well. So those are some things that we typically have on repeat. One thing that I often forget about, or I just don't prepare enough time for or feel like cooking in the evening, is grains. Specifically, whole grains can take a long time to cook, and I just don't necessarily feel like it. So having some quick cooking options on hand, something that you can pop in the microwave, takes 30 seconds to go. Oats, of course, can be a good meal builder. A lot of people don't necessarily think about that for the evening meal, but for breakfast, it's a great one. Barley I like. You can find quick cooking options for that. And then sometimes just at the beginning of the week, I will cook a large batch of that I can reuse in order to provide a little bit more balance to the meal. Because you mentioned frozen vegetables, those can be really easy to cook. If I've remembered the protein piece, that's already taken care of, but I need a little bit more to balance it out.
Yeah, and I think we're both taking ownership today, although this is something that is our career, helping people figure out what to eat and how to navigate it. we still have our own internal struggles.
Absolutely.
Making it happen every single night for our own family. So it's good to keep in mind that we're talking about progress, not perfection, when we're cooking family meals. So if you recognize right now, it might be once or twice a month we're getting everyone at the table. Maybe it is just saying my goal this week is to have one shared meal and coming together, or one person taking ownership of the shopping, somebody else doing the cooking, somebody else helping with the cleanup. So dividing up all of those pieces that we know kind of what it takes to come together and making that a family affair, I think also takes away some of the stress. And again, it's building some of those healthy habits, especially for children. So if they can help out with prep, like setting the table, rinsing vegetables, even maybe older teenagers can be chopping or cutting things. For younger kids that might be a little more fearful around heat or sharp items, counting and color recognition, right? So you're like, we need 4 potatoes. Those little things make them proud to be a part of a meal that they're then consuming. And then we recognize that their curiosity about trying new foods typically goes up when they've had a hand in preparing it. So any of those assembly things, any part where you can bring kids into the planning piece, I think that helps so much with taking a little bit of the stress away, and then hopefully making those steps towards that consistency of that shared meal time.
Yeah. And for the parent who might want to get their kid more involved in the planning process and the prep process, but doesn't necessarily know where to start, or who feels like it'd be easier if I just did everything myself, what advice would you give them?
I think choose maybe a weekend day or even a breakfast meal on the weekend where you recognize my time is not as constricted. Or if you're somebody that says, I have to control the chaos a little bit more, then really let it be finalized pieces of planning. So even if like you're making a salad, they're helping add the dressing or maybe putting toppings in there. So you've already done all the cutting, the chopping, like it's literally one component. And then I think grocery shopping, sometimes with children, we talked about this recently with going back to school, that can be a stressful place at times to take kids, and you're kind of on a mission, but that's a great opportunity for them to have some ownership in picking and choosing things. And we talked about this, narrow down the choices.
Yes.
Would you rather have Alfredo or spaghetti sauce with your pasta tonight? Those simple little things can really, again, kind of help with that engagement.
Yes. A core memory of mine from childhood was my mom had assigned each of us kids a day of the week, not every week. This was like a one-time deal where we had to plan meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner just one day, do the preparation, the shopping, and the cooking. And you mentioned taking ownership of that. We were so proud of the meals that we had. We were more willing to explore new things, and I think it really makes them less picky eaters in the long run. We had talked before about core memories.
Yes.
And so that's one for me. Do you have any favorite family meal memories from childhood?
Okay, so the weird thing for me is I grew up in Food City, original stores. So I remember going with my dad, and it would be a big deal on Saturday night because we would go and get steamed shrimp. And it was like a huge thing because I would be so excited to go home and help peel it.
Yes.
So that was like, I loved doing that. I thought it was like so fun. I got to help. And that was a very young age for me, remembering sitting on the counter as everyone's cooking dinner, and like every Saturday we're peeling shrimp.
And that's labor
which for the mountains of Southwest Virginia, that was definitely kind of a treat to be able to do that. And then I grew up being a vegetable lover, so that was always something that my mom let us help with. And I don't know if that made me more curious or made me want to eat them more, but we were peeling vegetables. We had safety knives that we used. So I think we were both probably little chefs. Notice that our dietitians' careers are kind of making sense. So if you want your kids to be interested in health and eating and cooking, maybe you can start them now.
Shucking corn in the summer.
Stringing beans.
Stringing beans, absolutely. Those things that don't really require any equipment at all, as long as your hands are clean, right?
But if you, again, to your point, are someone that says, that sounds lovely, and I also have those memories, but the reality is right now, I don't see having the time to do this. It is totally fine to also be picking up a frozen lasagna or a pizza or fried chicken from our deli and coming home and saying, I did nothing to cook and prepare this meal, but I'm taking the time to sit around the table, turn off the screens, and connect for 20 or 30 minutes.
Yep.
Still give yourself credit. Even if the nutrition isn't perfect, you didn't get to go through some of that process we talked about of building some of the relationship with food, that still counts towards that connectiveness. And I think the more that we prioritize that, it hopefully will give a little bit more opportunity to say, okay, could I do a 15-minute sheet pan meal or a crock pot meal this week just because I recognize how good that felt to kind of take a minute and slow down and eat at home.
Absolutely. And just, I think the act of planning that meal, even if it is something that you buy from the store, the odds are it's going to be a more nutrient-dense meal anyway. But some tips for kind of maximizing the nutrition if you're short on time. I think like a rotisserie chicken is going to be a great thing that you can build your meal around. It tastes good. It's satisfying. For most people enjoy that. And it's going to be a rich source of protein. And then you can easily pick up something like prepped vegetables to go with it. Even pasta is a pretty quick cooking option. A whole grain, add some frozen vegetables. Quick meal builders like that. What are your favorites?
I do use the salad bar quite a bit for meal planning, especially if I know like we're picking up a frozen pizza. We do that a lot on Friday nights. It's the end of a week. I will go through the salad bar because I'm like, I could go buy everything, but I could just make one big salad, not have to worry about it. I know I have a fresh component and I can mix up the ingredients, toppings pretty quickly. I also use our shortcuts quite a bit. We've talked about these for more labor-intensive things or when I'm really, really just short on time, that I'm getting a rotisserie chicken, I'm getting a vegetable I can throw in the oven on a sheet pan, and I'm getting some microwave rice. And I know that in 15 minutes I can have dinner on the table without the pickup. The cleanup is what gets me, I think, more than the prep. So those are some of those simple, intuitive eatings. And we talk about that my plate theory, or action, not theory, which is where when you think about planning your meal, the way that I think both of us mentally do it, I'm planning around a vegetable typically or fruit component. I'm adding a protein and I'm trying to feature a whole grain. Bonus points if you get some dairy in there too. But really those three things, protein, vegetable, fruit, and then the whole grain component is what we're looking for if you're wanting to build some of those better for you family meals.
Absolutely. And I think a great option is breakfast for dinner too. If eggs are an easy thing that are quick cooking, whether that's hard-boiled eggs or if you are doing them sautéed or scrambled, a great thing for family meals. If you can, I love the Kodiak Cakes whole grain pancakes. You get your grain in there or maybe some potatoes. Maybe a vegetable is not as likely to go with breakfast
Hey, that's
meal,
okay.
but you can do fruit.
Yeah, we said progress, not perfection, right? So one component that you recognize, I made a swap or a better for me choice. Again, that's how we get that consistent behavior change. And in my family growing up, we called it Brenner. So,
Yep.
I feel like that's something that gets kids excited too. And, we keep going back to that meal planning component. I'm kind of old school. I use a paper calendar. It can be something on your phone or a shared family calendar. But I do think looking at your cabinets, your pantry, your freezer, what you have on hand that you can start building from. And then when I go shopping, I personally like to make my list by departments of the store.
Yes.
So I kind of go the same little route every single time. I'm going to start in the produce. I'm going to hit the meat or center store, and then I'm going to finish up with dairy and frozen. And I find that by writing that down can help me with looking at weekly ads or coupons to say, oh, I'm going to feature pork tenderloin this week because that's featured in our weekend sale. So those little things also, I think, help if you're wondering on how to start building a meal plan or how to start structuring it. Just start with some of those simple behaviors, I think, make it quite easy.
Yep, I think the weekend meal deals make it super easy, and then you might have a little bit more time on the weekends and sit down with family, get kids involved in the planning and process, and it's already kind of assembled for you. You just mostly have to heat it and eat it.
Yeah, those have been a huge hit in my family. I mean, every weekend we were getting those. And I love that they're Sunday. You can still pick them up. So you can either cook it Sunday night to start your week off strong, eating together, or typically it works well to kind of feature for that Monday meal,
Yep.
which is always great.
What are your hacks for adding flavor to maybe some vegetables, grains, flavor hacks for maybe some pickier eaters in the family?
I do think it's important to keep in mind that, garlic, onion, things like that are going to be natural aromatics. I tend to use those a lot in the base of my cooking, especially when I'm doing meat or veggies, putting a little oil down, getting those started. And then I tend to do herb-based seasonings that are pre-mixed. So I love our Food Club brand. I'm also a big Kinder's girl. Those have a little bit more sodium or salt in them, but those tend to be easy for me. And I normally keep a few flavor profiles on hand. So fajita mix or maybe a steak seasoning or an Asian-based one. So I know I can kind of take the basics of a chicken, a vegetable, and a rice.
Right, and mix and match.
Yep, exactly. And I think, too, when we look at the way that we kind of have seasonings now, there's so much inspiration and flavor profiles. And some of our favorite restaurants we might go out to eat are now making it available in the grocery store to get some of those flavors. So I think if you can recreate something you're going out and maybe doing at a restaurant at home, like a taco night, always makes it fun for the family, always makes it easy to engage. And then your kids, again, might be more curious about a familiar flavor they're getting outside of the house.
Yes.
And you can kind of replicate that restaurant experience. I think that's always special, too.
I love that. And you can always just mix and match with so many different things. That's the beauty of like citrus and herbs, and kids can get involved in that too.
Yes.
Even if it's not necessarily something that comes intuitive to you, allowing them to explore a little bit, I think
the
gets
senses,
them excited.
the smell is incredible, getting to kind of experience that. And I think one thing we haven't touched on this whole time we've talked today is that one way that we're encouraging people this month to really get out and share some meals together and try some new recipes is we've worked with some awesome partners to create a family meals recipe booklet. You can find it online, you can find it in our stores, but it gives a lot of tips on some of those cooking basics and maybe using some familiar or unfamiliar recipe items to build some quick and healthy meals. So for our Food City Family Meals Month, we are encouraging everyone to at least commit to one meal per week, or maybe at least one great shared meal this month to really get that habit and get those benefits going.
Absolutely. And they can find the family meal booklet in stores or online starting in September.
Yeah, and happy Family Meals Month.
Happy Family Meals Month.